anyone and everyone that he could to please John. It was 1995 when John kicked Veronica out of the house. By now, Veronica could see that there was more than just a friendship between Elizabeth and John, and she left without arguing, saying if he wanted Elizabeth, he could have her. Jamie had become infatuated with John Bunting at this point. He hung off his every word, idolised him, followed him around like a little puppy dog. John became a father figure for him, and when he spewed his hatred towards pedophiles and gay people and anyone else who was on his list, Jamie took it all in. And then it happened again. Jamie, already off the rails, unable to cope with the trauma that had consumed his life, was abused one more time. Around this time, Robert Wagner and Barry Lane's relationship had started to increase in violence. Barry was upset at Robert for spending all of his time with John Bunting. They had some massive fights, violently belting the shit out of each other. One day, John told Elizabeth that Barry Lane had touched up her son. Not only did Elizabeth attack Barry, but Robert Wagner did as well. The fighting between Barry and Robert didn't stop. During one argument, Robert called him a pedophile. He screamed at him in a rage. "You bastard, you took me when I was 14. The sudden change in Robert Wagner no doubt could be attributed to him being under the influence of John Bunting. Police eventually became involved due to the frequency of violence, and they advised Barry to get out of the house because it wasn't safe. After Barry left, John convinced Robert to move in with him and Elizabeth. Robert idolised John like a god, and as soon as Barry was out of the picture, he immediately started going out with girls, eager to impress his idol. Living a short distance away from John Bunting's house was intellectually handicapped Ray Davies. He was born in 1969. His parents were both intellectually handicapped and they were incapable of looking after him, so he was raised by his auntie. As Ray grew up, he showed an interest in dolls and dressing up in girls' clothes. And when he was 13, he was caught by his auntie performing a sex act with their dog. He later came under attention of police with other incidents involving animals. Ray lived in a caravan in the backyard of his landlady's house. Her name was Suzanne Allen. John Bunting had recently become friends with Suzanne, so he was spending a lot of time with her. Suzanne would often drive past his house and call in to visit him, see if he wanted to go with her to wherever she was going. Needless to say, Elizabeth Harvey wasn't a big fan of her. Barry Lane and Robert Wagner had already met Ray Davies, so John knew all about him before he met Suzanne. Ray was often seen out in public, exposing himself and masturbating. There were even reports he tried to entice children back to his caravan. Rumours started whispering around town that Ray had succeeded in touching up a child. Suzanne Allen confronted him about this, and it ended up getting violent. Police became involved, and Suzanne got a restraining order against Ray. Not long after this, Ray Davies disappeared. Just vanished. No one knew where he went. But at the same time, no one really cared. They assumed he had moved on after being kicked out of Suzanne's place. Nobody filed a missing persons report. So what really happened? It was December 1995. John Bunting and Robert Wagner took the 26-year-old Ray Davies for a drive. Ray was in the back seat being held down by Robert, who was beating him up quite badly. They beat him with a metal pole and abused and tormented him the entire time. They later handcuffed him and put him in the boot of the car before driving to John's house at Waterloo Corner Road. They marched him inside and John proudly told Elizabeth that he has brought her a present. A filthy pedophile. Ray continued to get beaten with the metal pole, including many strikes to his groin. Elizabeth even joined in the attack, stabbing Ray in the leg with a ceramic tool. John and Robert couldn't control their excitement. They were laughing and really enjoying what they were doing. Eventually, they strangled Ray to death. They buried him in a hole in the backyard of the house. Suzanne Allen didn't know what happened to Ray. Didn't really care either. She was just happy he was gone. John came around and helped her clean out his trailer. They continued to spend a bit of time together until eventually Suzanne became too much for John. He started to get sick of her constant advances. She was too over the top. He started dropping hints at her that he didn't want to see her anymore. When that didn't work, he told her directly to piss off and leave him alone. But that didn't work either. Suzanne kept at it, driving past his house and writing him love letters. John then started to become aggressive towards her. He accused her of tolerating Ray's behaviour. He said that because she never kicked him out until he assaulted her, that meant she must have condoned what he was doing before. Suzanne was heartbroken. She loved John. She spiralled into depression and even started mentioning suicide. Until one day, she disappeared. No note, no word to any of her family, just gone. Not long after her disappearance, her car went missing from her driveway. Then her neighbours reported an odd occurrence. A few men turned up in the middle of the night and started carrying furniture out of her house. Suzanne's brother reported her missing in November 1996. Police started looking into her disappearance and saw that her bank account was still active. Her pension was still being deposited each fortnight and it was quickly being withdrawn. She had even put in a change of address to the suburb of Murray Bridge. The leasee's name of the new place she was living at? John Bunting. The police called John. He told them, yes, he knew Suzanne Allen. She used to live with him. But she had since taken off and he doesn't know where she is now. As far as he was aware, she had moved to another state with a man, and she didn't want to be contacted by her family. The police got back in touch with Suzanne's family. Everything was fine, they told them. They believed she had moved to another state. And she was still accessing a bank account, so obviously she was okay. She just didn't want to be contacted. Suzanne was actually dead. John was sitting on Suzanne's furniture that was now in his house as he hung up the phone after speaking with the police. He couldn't help but laugh. John had been friendly with Suzanne when they first met, but he could quickly change his opinion of you. Suzanne was 47, and it was November 1996 when she died. She was cut into tiny pieces, put into several different garbage bags, and buried on top of Ray Davies in the backyard of 203 Waterloo Corner Road, Salisbury North. John and Elizabeth weren't even living there at this stage. It was his ex-wife Veronica that had moved back there. And she was used to John and his mates making unexpected visits all the time. She didn't ask questions about what they were doing in the backyard that night. She thought it best she didn't know. John, Elizabeth and the kids were now living at an address in Murray Bridge, which was about 100 kilometres away from Salisbury North. John told Elizabeth about Suzanne. What he said happened was that he and Robert broke into her house with the intention of stealing from her only. But when they got inside, they found her already dead. They buried her in the backyard so they wouldn't get in trouble for breaking in, and so they could steal her welfare payments. John handed Elizabeth Suzanne's ID and told her to go to the bank posing as Suzanne so they could collect her welfare. Elizabeth, who by this stage was continually in and out of hospital with her psychiatric problems, didn't ask questions. Yes, John. Good idea, John. I won't say anything, John.